Good morning to everyone. Thank you for this very kind introduction. Thank you, Professor Ognate, for this invitation. This is always a pleasure for me to participate to Particles and to be here in Barcelona. So my talk this morning will be divided in two parts. In the first part, I will check the predictive capacity of discrete element method with respect to phenomenological elastoplastic relation, and finally ask the question why DEM are so efficient. And in the second part, I will consider the question of failure in granular materials, localized failure, diffuse failures, the question of critical states, and finally try to answer the question why plastic strains are localizing sometimes in shear bands in granular material. So, first part, to check the predictive capacity of DEM by comparing this predictive capacity with the one related to elastoplastic relation. And I would like to introduce this part by a question, what is the best constitutive theory or method? This is a question for you. Physicists have given many years ago an answer to this question. The best theory is the one producing very large outputs for very few inputs. So we will keep in mind this definition of the best theory by considering DEM versus elastoplasticity. You know that for several decades, constitutive modeling was treated only by phenomenological elastoplastic relation. But today it is clear that discrete element methods are also able to simulate constitutive relation. But more or less strangely, elastoplastic relations have been checked with respect for their predictive capacities a lot, very carefully, very precisely during a benchmark workshop. But this question is still open with respect to discrete element method, and presently we don't know exactly the capacities of DEM to simulate complex 3D loading paths. This is exactly the purpose of the first part of this lecture. So, with respect to elastoplastic relation, the question of their predictive capacities were checked during some benchmark workshop in Grenoble in 82, in Cleveland in 87. Excuse me, and I will consider only Cleveland in this talk. And during this workshop, a very rigorous procedure was considered. Some calibration tests were sent to the authors of constitutive relation. Then some blind prediction were asked to these authors, and during the workshop, the prediction proposed by the authors of constitutive relation were compared to the experimental results corresponding to this prediction test. So I propose you to follow the same kind of procedure by considering discrete element method. Probably the most famous prediction loading paths for a Cleveland workshop was this circular stress path. Why it is not working, the pointer? You agree with me, huh? You don't see any. Oh, this is not so important. This is a deviatoric stress plane, and the prediction loading path was this circular stress path in this deviatoric stress plane here compared to the pyramidal Mohr-Coulomb criterion. This loading path is difficult because you see that the incremental loading direction is changing for each increment, and successively the three principal stresses are increasing, then decreasing. So, of course, it was not a simple prediction path. The typical results are, are given here. In red, you have the experimental responses corresponding to this circular path, and in black, the prediction given by two typical elastoplastic relations. The small one in black was an elastoplastic relation with an isotropic hardening, and the other black curve was the prediction given by a typical elastoplastic relation with kinematic hardening. Below you have the volume variation, and you see that even the sign of the volume relation were not predicted by this typical constitutive relation. So the question is now, what about DEM? Since for classical elastoplastic relation, the predictions were even qualitatively not acceptable. If you want to reproduce, for example, the friction angle of real sand by a discrete element method, you cannot consider only the classical discrete element modeling of the interaction between two grains with a normal elastic stiffness, a tangential elastic stiffness, and a friction angle, intergranular friction angle, which is limiting the tangential force. If you want to reproduce a proper friction angle of a true sand, there are classically two ways. The first way is to add a rolling resistance, a rolling and twisting resistance. This model will be called DMR, R as a rolling resistance, or you can consider clumps of particles, and two different clumps have been considered, either by gluing two particles or by confounding in part two particles. this second discrete element model will be called DMC as clustering. The calibration of DM are rolling, are like rolling. The calibration was given here. Only one triaxial test is enough to calibrate this kind of DEM model. You have in red the experimental responses, and in black the calibration. You see that the calibration is not perfect, particularly with respect to the dilatancy. For DMC with clustering, you see also the calibration on this triaxial paths, which was given for Cleveland benchmark workshop, which was given to the authors of constitutive relation. Same procedure here. You see that the calibration is better for the clump C1, black curve, with respect to the clump C2. So the clump C1 was considered for the prediction. Okay, let's go now to see the prediction given by both the DEM model. You see in black curves are giving this prediction. You see that the predictions are not absolutely satisfying, but anyway, a lot better than the elastoplastic relation we have seen previously. Above, you have the prediction given by the best elastoplastic relation for Cleveland workshop. Of course, for this incrementally nonlinear relation, you have a number of parameters, more or less close to 20 parameters, where in DM you have 5, 6, or 7 parameters. But we can try to backfit the discrete element model with respect to this loading path. And here, this is a backfitting for the DMR model. In red, the experiment. In black, the blind prediction. And you see that if you decrease the elastic stiffness in blue, you can reproduce quite well the experimental responses. Same thing if you decrease the initial density in green, you can become closer to the experimental responses. But coming back to the calibration, you see that even if the predictions are better, the calibration is now not so good with this change in the parameters, in the local parameters, describing the interaction between two grains. Huh? In black, it was initial calibration, and in green, in blue, not so good. Same thing for the volume variation. So there is not clearly a good solution to improve the quality of the prediction. Same thing with the other DM model with clustering. in red, the experiment, in black, the blind prediction, in blue, by decreasing the elastic stiffnesses, and in green, by decreasing the friction angle. Excuse me, previously, smooth contact means a decrease of the friction angle. And in red, decreasing the initial density. Once more, we are able, by changing a little bit the calibration parameters, we are able to reproduce in a better way the prediction, the predicted responses. But again, for this DEM clustering, the calibration are not so good with these new parameters for the stress strain curve. Same thing for the volume variation curve. So DEM is a lot better with respect to classical elastoplastic relation for this kind of paths, but the predictions are still not absolutely satisfying, and I will come back on this question. Of course, this is in relation with the fact that you are trying to take into account real sand, a true sand, by considering this rolling resistance or by considering clustering, which is, of course, not perfect. But now you have here a 3D cyclic path. This is a radial path in the deviatoric stress plane. And in red, you have the experimental responses for this 3D cyclic loading path. And in black, the prediction given by DEM R with rolling resistance. You see now for this path that not any existing phenomenological elastoplastic relation is able to predict this kind of responses. You see with a large first cycle in the stress strain diagram, 10 more or less stabilized asymptotic open cycle, and for the volume variation, these very complicated volume variation with large contractancy after the unloading. So here the results are really impressive, and the difference with phenomenological elastoplastic relation is here a big gap. So DEM is able to predict in an absolutely reasonable way the behavior of granular materials, even for complex loading paths. And now, so once more, if we compare with elastoplastic relation, DEM need only to describe the interaction between two grains, and this description is quite simple with two elastic stiffnesses, one friction angle, and for rolling resistance, two other parameters. But anyway, these calibration parameters are a lot simple with respect to the 20 parameters necessary to calibrate classical constitutive relation. And now an interesting question is why and how DEM is able to describe so efficiently the behavior of granular material. Indeed, DEM is just the is basically the application of molecular dynamics techniques to granular material. Molecular dynamics is a well-known method in modern physics to describe very different natural phenomena. For example, with molecular dynamics, it's possible to describe the universe structure, to describe quantum mechanics, molecules of fluids, atoms in solid materials, and so on. Very different scales are considered in molecular dynamics. The forces can be contact forces, like for us in granular materials, or at distance forces, like for molecules with electrochemical potentials or universal gravitation. In all these situations, the elemental laws between the basic entities are quite simple and well known. Finally, what is the main ingredients in molecular dynamics? The main ingredient is the fact that you have an extremely big number of particles, of grains, of stars in interaction. And this very big number of particles in interaction allow to perform in a very realistic grain an upscaling, a change of scale. And as we know, when you properly upscale, homogenize some elemental properties in nature, as we know nature, when we upscale properly, there is a general property of nature, which is the emergence, very important concept in physics today, the emergence of new macroscopic properties due to this upscaling. And finally, I consider that DEM is so powerful to predict complex behavior because we have DEM is able to take into account a proper upscaling by considering a very big number of elements in interactions. Of course, there are some limits. We have seen that. The first limit is certainly the question of a proper description of the shape of the grains, including the description of asperities, of microasperities. These microasperities play certainly an important role for true granular materials, for isotropic compression or eudometric compression. And this is still an open question, even if some level set method allow today to take into account more general shapes for the particle. The second limitation is well known. This is the fact that the number of granular entities is limited. But I am convinced that with parallelization techniques, this question will be taken into account properly in still today, but a lot more in the coming years. And just today, several billions of grain can be taken into account. So let's go to the second part of this talk. By analyzing the mesostructures in relation with critical states, either inside the shear band in the case of localized failure, or for the whole sample in the case of a diffuse failure. And finally, we will try to answer to the question why plastic strains are localizing in granular materials. We will try to answer to this question from microstructural point of view. So this is here the modeling of 4 samples by the discrete element software which has been developed in Grenoble, YADE software. You have 3 dense sample with a clear shear band, and a 4th sample with a diffuse failure without any shear band. The path is proportional strain loading path, what means that only the initial density is different for these 4 cases. The loading path is the same. You see that for the dense cases, the 3 dense cases, you have clear shear bands, while for the loose case, you have a network not of shear bands, but of slip lines. Not shear bands because not any thickness, and anyway, the localization criterion is not verified in this case. These slip lines, which are very clear in the loose sample, appear, you can observe that in your numerical discrete element simulation. These slip lines appear always more or less from the beginning of the application of the loading path. But when you have shear bands, these slip lines are more or less disappearing, not fully. You see this kind of slip lines here. But in the case of diffuse failure, these slip lines are persistent slip lines. So, first point, we have checked the void ratio, the density, inside the shear bands for the dense sample, and for the whole sample in the case of the loose case. You see here the comparison between the variation of the void ratio in the loose case, diffuse failure in red, and for the three dense sample inside the shear band in blue, and for the whole sample in green. You see clearly that the red curve and the blue curves are converging asymptotically for the critical states, showing that the void ratio inside the shear band is the same as the void ratio for the whole sample in the case of a loose sand. this result is quite known, has been already verified experimentally. But now we have checked the mesostructures inside the shear band, and for the whole sample, in the case of a loose sand. To check these mesostructures, we have considered the number, the relative number of grain loops. The loops constituted by 3 grains, the loops with 4 grains, 5 grains, and 6 grains, and more. These mesostructures, of course, are a good feature of the mesostructure of the granular material inside the shear band, and once more for the whole sample, for the whole loose sample. You see that the variation of these relative number of loops are quite different if you consider loops with 3 grains, diagram A, with 6 grains or more B, 4 grains C, and 5 grains D. You see that some loops have a decreasing relative number as for the 3 grain loops, and other loops are, on the contrary, an increasing number of these loops as for 5 grain, for example. You have, as previously, the comparison between these relative number of loops for the loose sample in red, and for the 3 different dense samples in green, blue, and orange. And what is interesting is the fact that all these curves are converging asymptotically for large strains. What means that the critical state, the mesostructures associated to critical state are the same inside the shear band and for the whole sample in the case of a diffuse failure. So nature is simple. Critical state as correspond to a unique state of microstructure, mesostructures. So we can conclude that this critical state is unique even by considering not only the void ratio linked to the critical state, but also by considering, by taking into account the mesostructure. What means that this is a theoretical result. Inside shear band, the failure is diffuse. This is basically why the void ratio, the mesostructures are the same. But now a question is why and how is failure localizing sometimes in granular material? First, some general conclusion. We know, we have observed that since a long time, for cohesive materials, we observe these networks of slip lines which are linked to micro fissures in the case of cohesive material, and these slip lines have been also observed. We have seen this kind of result, but these slip lines are today also observed experimentally by tomographic methods. And this is not numerical results given by a discrete element method. This is also experimental observation by tomographic method. These slip lines for ductile material, for granular material, are linked to local intergranular sliding. What is interesting and a little bit disturbing maybe, this is the fact that slip lines and shear bands are, from a theoretical point of view, given by fully different methods. Slip lines are the solution of an hyperbolic system of equation given by the equilibrium equation and the plastic limit condition, here Mohr-Coulomb criterion. And you remember probably for your basic classes in perfect plasticity, in limit analysis, that if the material is associated, no problem, we find a unique solution which is perfectly admissible. But you know that granular materials are probably the best example of non-associated material. So, for granular materials, we have a friction angle which is different from the dilatancy angle, and this hyperbolic system of equation can be written in a static manner by considering the friction angle, and by a kinematic manner by considering the dilatancy angle. So we have two solutions for not associated material. What is the basic reason why limit analysis is not applicable to granular materials, because you have these two solutions. On the other hand, shear bands are obtained by a localization criterion, sometimes called Rice criterion, which is the vanishing value of the determinant of the so-called acoustic tensor. This localization criterion is obtained in a fully different manner just by considering all the ingredients necessary to have a shear band, a rising shear band inside a given material. N is a direction, is a normal to the shear band, and gives you the direction of the shear band, and L is the constitutive elastoplastic operator. So, two different theories, and we have seen from this discrete element modeling that both these concepts of slip lines and of shear bands can appear in granular material. How it is possible? More or less curiously, the orientation of slip lines and shear band are not so far, even if these orientations are coming from fully independent theory, they are not so far. For triaxial compression or extension, the direction of the slip lines are given in the static solution by this relation, or the kinematic solution with the dilatancy angle psi. For the shear band orientation, we have not any clear solution, because the solution depends on L on the constitutive elastoplastic relation. So we have not any clear analytical solution for the orientation of shear bands, but according to experimental results and according also to numerical results by finite element method or by discrete element method, more or less we have this expression for the orientation of the shear band in triaxial compression and extension. So the directions are very close each other. There is a consistent orientation for slip lines obtained in perfect plasticity and for shear bands obtained as a plastic strain localization phenomenon. And now we can discuss that more or less as a conjecture. That will be discussed in the session called in this conference, in the session called granular plasticity. You will have some lectures by Antoine Vautier and Jiaying Liu, giving some result in progress on this question. Okay. For localized failure, we can consider then, and we observe that once more in tomographic measurement and in discrete element modeling, we can conjecture that some slip lines are critical and are giving rise to shear bands. Why? A possibility is that if we have a local softening, and of course along slip lines, for some slip lines, some stress states will pass the stress peak if the material has a constitutive softening, and if for some point the stresses are passing this peak, it means suddenly the occurring of a negative tangent modulus, and of course for the material to pass from a positive tangent modulus to a negative one, this is a catastrophic event, and maybe this catastrophic event is developing into a shear band. On the other hand, for diffuse failure, what is observed is just the persistency of these shear band, maybe because we have not any local softening. Okay, I will, these general conclusions are very, very obvious. We have treated these two cases here, but, and that will be my last slide. Other example of the interest to consider discrete element simulation in granular mechanics. This is, I have not, of course, evoked these 2 points here. This is a question of capillary stress tensor in a partially saturated granular material. The capillary stress is not an isotropic spherical tensor characterized by a scalar, but a true tensor, and that explain why a Bishop relation for partially saturated granular material was never verified experimentally. And another interesting point, which has been checked by discrete element method, this is this existence of a bifurcation domain and of instability cones for granular material, as shown from a theoretical point of view by the second order work criterion. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.